All right, my name is Rich Schmidt. I'm here with Alex Sokolbwasser. We're at Sokolbwasser Winery in Dayton. It's August 7th, 2018. And Alex, we're going to start by asking you, why wine?
Yeah, why wine? Well, because of my parents. So, simple answer. I grew up in the business, so was lucky enough to have that experience growing up. So it was really because of mom and dad.
Yeah.
This is a passion for them, and that's the end of the day, being born into the family. That is what positioned me to be part of the wine industry, because I don't know if I would have gotten into it if I wasn't born into it.
So tell me about that. Tell me about growing up in the industry and kind of your perspectives there. And did you ever consider doing something else?
So, growing up in it was a lot of work. Parents never, they never said, this will be yours. It was always, well, if you want to make some money, there's a lot of work to be done. Mm-hmm. So, my older brother and I would spend a lot of times in the vineyard in the summertime working. I'm 6 years older than my sister, Allison, so wasn't a lot of times working with her. It was mostly my older brother is only like 3 years older than me. Mm-hmm. So, and it actually got to the point where I'm like, this is too hard of work. I want to get a different job. So when I was 15, I got a job as a bike mechanic at a local bike shop in McMinnville. So I was a bike mechanic, and I thought, well, this is living, because now I'm in air conditioning. I don't have to worry about, working out in the field. So, and I remember working those long days in the vineyard in the summertime, and I'm like, you know what? Ooh, I'm going to marry some New York babe, live in the big city, get away from Oregon. Mm-hmm. This will be history. So, but look at me now. So life is about perspective, and once you go off to college and you realize what you had, you go, wow, it's actually, I know I wanted to get away from it, but I love the business, and I love that. Mm-hmm. If you got to find a career and do something that means something to you. I learned after doing some other things. I think one of the things that always spoke to me was working harvest. Because even though I got a job as a bike mechanic, when I was a teenager, I'd always work harvest here. To the point where my senior year in high school, the high school counselor was like, you better start studying this fall if you want to go to college, because your grades suck. Because I was working so much harvest, and it was, so much fun. Because you're working with these guys. When was that? So that was in '92. We had a crazy Kiwi and a crazy Aussie. Winemaker was John Ha back then, and it was just a harvest is a kind of a carnival environment, so to speak, and that was always appealing to me, and that was fun. But yeah, I did get better grades after that.
Tell me about the early days, being a child in the kind of the industry that almost doesn't exist yet, and kind of you would have known the whole wine industry at that point, and you would have known the kids and stuff too. So tell me about some of the relationships, some of the memories you have.
Yeah, I remember, going to, because Adam Campbell was my brother's age. Mm-hmm. He's a winemaker now at Elk Cove, and I remember going to basketball games when it was Dayton versus Gaston, and it was my brother versus Adam. So I was like, all right, we got to beat Adam's team. This is a big deal. It's a little bit of competition. The people I remember most growing up with would be, the Ponzi kids, Maria and Louisa, Adam, and then Jason led with Irie. Mm-hmm. So, because that's who we would, when we go to parties and the parents would go off in their corner and, drink and chat about the industry, we would run around the house and who knows do what. So, also during snow days on the hill, it was Jason and I and my older brother, we would go on some pretty epic sled runs. So it was more of, just kids hanging out. We didn't start, again, I don't think we realized that we were second generation of a first generation winemaking family until we were much older. And then we realized, wow, okay, we do share quite a lot in common. We have a very similar background. Parents did exactly the same thing at the same time. And so, now, I see, Adam and Louisa and Maria and a little bit with Jason more than I ever did when I was growing up. And we have all these shared memories too, with growing up in the same neck of the woods. So it was, again, perspective is everything. Because I think when we were hanging out as kids, it was just, you watched the latest episode of the A-Team. Yeah, I did. It was great. What are you doing? No wine discussions until we're older.
Sure.
20s, 30s,
sure.
In the industry, doing our thing and exchanging notes and working on that.
Sure.
So, yeah.
So let's talk about you go off to college. You're not necessarily thinking about doing wine at that point. What's the turning point for you? What point do you realize?
So my first year at college was at Texas in San Antonio at Trinity University in San Antonio, and it was I never visited Trinity. It was the only college I applied to that actually allowed me in. So I aimed high. I tried to get into Duke, Vanderbilt, Tulane. So where else did I apply? I aimed high. So I think my backup was Trinity, and then I just wanted to get the hell out of here. So, and these were all, I've never been to the South. So I thought, I'll go to the best school in the South.
Sure.
So I was actually most interested in going to Tulane in New Orleans. I think that sounds very exotic to a high school senior growing up in Dayton, Oregon. It's like, wow, New Orleans. Never been there. I don't see black people. A lot of black people in New Orleans.
Sure.
We're growing up in Oregon, very, very white.
Yeah.
The only. So that was something I was, hoping, to experience something different than what is here. Still like New Orleans. Went there, not in college. So Trinity, all right. So go to Trinity, and I missed home. Went there, had a really good first year. I had too much fun. And I realized, God, I actually think I might want to come home and study forestry. Because I love the outdoors. I loved, backpacking. So I transferred to Oregon State. And when I transferred to Oregon State, I studied forestry, but I needed to make some money. So I went to the viticulture and enology department, and met Barney Watson, who was head of enology, and then Steve Price, who was head of the viticulture, and I said, hey, you need any help? I know how to grow, I know how to do all this stuff. And they said, sure, we'll hire you to work harvest, and we'll hire you to do projects in the field. So I said, great. So I need to, these are my skills, my background. I know how to make money doing this way. So that was my job. So I worked. Actually, most of my hours were spent with Bernadine Strict in her lab studying phylloxera. And we had phylloxera in our vineyard, so it was like pertinent. So that was great. So I studied forestry, but after that was the first term. So the second term I actually took some horticulture classes, which was more about viticulture, while still working with Steve and Barney and Bernadine. And then, and then after my second term, I got bored. Then I joined the military. And that was that. So I didn't do a straight 4 years of college. And then, when I was in the military, I just joined the reserves, so I was in the Air Force. So for the next year, between basic training and all the training, I came home, and then I'm like, well, what am I going to do? And it was the harvest of 1994. So, well, I need to make some money. What am I going to do? I'm going to work harvest. So I worked harvest here at Sokol Blosser for the harvest of 94. And then after working harvest, the winemaker at the time, John Ha, said, Alex, what are you going to do? I said, well, I'm not going to go back to college. I'm not ready yet. I want to work. So he said, we needed our cellar master left after harvest, so he hired me as our cellar master. So the day after he hired me as cellar master, my mom fired me as cellar master. And not because I wasn't doing a good job. She fired me because Sokol Blosser wasn't wholly owned by the Sokol Blosser family. We were owned by majority by Sokol Blosser, and then we also had some minority owners, the Durant Vineyards and Highland Vineyards. And they made it very clear to my mom that they don't want more than 2 family members at the same time working at the same time. So only my mom could work. My mom and my dad, no. My mom and me, no. So the next day, my mom fired me. So that didn't go over very well. Didn't go over very well with me. So I said, fuck it. Okay. So I mean, to me, in my mind, it's like, well, this. I know it says Sokol Blosser, but it's not really a family business because we don't have control over it, and that's okay. I'll go someplace else. Right across the way, they're building Archery Summit, and I'm like, looks like they need work. So I went over there, met with Andy Humphrey, and he hired me as his vineyard foreman. So I worked for Andy as a vineyard foreman for about a year, and I was there, that's back when Gary Andrus was around. Gary would diligently do his best to piss off a lot of people. God bless him. May he rest in peace. And to that end, he would love to drive his big S Suburban to our crush pad, just on our property, on our crush pad, so he can see how his facility is being built. Pissed my mom off to no end. But that was Gary. So yeah, worked for Gary, worked for Andy for a little over a year, and then after working in the vineyard for a year, I realized, oh yeah, I forgot, this is a lot of work. Vineyard work's a lot of work. Physically demanding work. And then I realized, you know what? Maybe I should go back to college. Maybe. And I kind of figured out what I wanted to study. Philosophy. And so I went to Portland State. And in 2.5 years, knocked out my degree at Portland State. And I was also the news editor for the school paper. I really loved that. I was thinking, maybe I could be in news or something like that. Because I just studied philosophy because I love philosophy. I don't want to be a teacher. Ugh. I love people who can teach. That's great. They got patience. That wasn't going to be me. Then when I finally got my degree, that was 97. It's like, well, what am I going to do now? Well, I knew how to farm. So I applied I got a job offer to work for Alan Holstein at, back then it was the Dundee Wine Company, which was the farming arm of Argyle. But my mom said, well, why don't you, Alex, you're personable. Why don't you try selling wine? Why don't you, I can get you an interview at least with our distributor. So I did that. I got an interview with the distributor. And the distributor, I got a job offer there. And then also I went, you go to the job fair your college job fair, and I applied to sell life insurance like a lot of seniors do, because wow, there's a lot of money in that. Oh my God. And then in the last interview with that, I realized that I don't play golf. And I realized in the final interview, you're interviewing with the head of the life insurance company, and I'm like, wow, this is really boring. I don't play golf. I can't do this. So I decided to try the job selling wine, working for Columbia Distributing. That was back when Ed Miletus ran the show there. And I started as a merchandiser in Salem, did that for 3 months until a sales slot opened up. And then a sales slot opened up in Portland, was up in Portland, and then sold everything from wine to Snapple to Fred Meyer's, Safeways, Albertsons, all these, grocery stores. And that was fun. I realized, wow, this is something I'm good at. Yeah, it was good. So, and then my mom offered to hire me. Now, here's what changed between when I graduated in 97 from college. My mom engineered a way to buy out Highland and Durant. So in 97, we became wholly family owned and operated. So, and I'll never forget my mom, the quote from the time, which is tattooed in my brain. My mom said, "The only partner I want is one to dance with." No more business partners. And that's how we've remained to this day like that. When you have business partners, they'll say, well, I know you hired your son, but now you got to fire him. Ooh.
Yeah.
That's fun. So when my mom offered me a sales job at the winery, this was in the summer of '98. Things have changed. She wasn't going to hire me and fire me. She'd fire me if I just sucked, not because I'm a Sokol-Blaser. I thought long and hard about it, because I was like, well, this is weird, but I know we own it, and we all put money into the pot so we could buy out the partners. We all, as family members, made that investment. So I'm like, yeah, I think I can do this. So that was in 1998. And I've been here ever since. But I think, if anything, the tale of how I came into the business wasn't a straight path. It curved, and a lot of it had to do with, when you need to make a buck and support yourself, how are you going to do it? Well, you're going to rely on the skills that you know and that are marketable. And for me, that was always, managing and running a vineyard or working harvest. And so I always leaned on those. And then when we finally got control of the family wine, the business, then I was able to offer to the family business another side of myself, which was sales and marketing. And as I've learned in this business, is you can make great wine, but if you can't sell it, you're nowhere. So being able to sell is really everything.
Sure.
The sales and marketing piece. There are wineries that wine might be crap, but they've got a great sales and marketing engine, machine, that they'll decimate anyone, the competition, even if other wine is superior. So you see that time and time again. So the ability to sell and market and get your message across, because at the end of the day, a lot of the wine industry is a fashion industry. We're in the fashion business. So and developing that, having that story, weaving it in a way that's so beautiful, people, will just go, wow, that really resonates with me. I'm going to buy the hell out of your wine. So
So you mentioned working for a time with a distributor, and that's a pretty interesting route to go from there back into the family business because you saw that sales in. So tell us a little about what you learned in that role about the sale of wine and about how to,
So I was trained by a guy at Columbia who was one of the best sales reps at Columbia. He's been doing it his whole life, and he taught me a lot. And the first lesson is this. He said, he was a smoker. He said, Alex, this is really important. You got to understand this one thing. He said, it ain't sold till it's pissed out in the urinal. And I'm like, okay, what does that mean? So he said, you can sell a wine into an account, being a retailer or a restaurateur, but you got to help them move it too. You got to make them excited to sell your product. So let's just say you get a big display at Fred Meyer. Well, you got to get the store manager, you got to get the wine steward excited about your product, because you can put a display up doesn't mean it's going to sell.
Sure.
You got to help them move through it. Same thing with a restaurant. You got to train the wait staff. You got to get people excited about your product so it actually moves. So the main thing about that I learned about selling wine is making the sale is just part of what you got to do. You got to help the account sell through, and that could just be because you run a lot of ads out there that helps the throughput, or you've got some other kind of hook that helps. Clearly having a story is pretty damn important. I mean, I take that for granted because I'm Alex Sokol-Blosser. But, if I'm not Alex Sokol-Blosser and I'm selling Sokol-Blosser wine, you've got to have a story. You say, oh, well, hey, if I'm the salesperson for Sokol-Blosser, you say, one of the oldest wineries in Oregon, this is what they do, they're good to the earth, they're organic farmers, Alex is the winemaker there. I mean, you got to have a story. Some reason for people to say, wow, this wine is worth buying over the 1,000 other labels I'm looking at in the supermarket. So, you got to do it all. You got to have good packaging. I mean, it's got to look like, redeemable enough that you just want to at least take the bottle off the shelf and look at it.
Sure.
So, there's some similarities between labels and, book covers. If you go to Powell's, it's like, why did you pull that off the shelf? It's probably either because the book cover was amazing or because it was a staff pick. There was a reason. If you catch yourself and ask yourself, why did I actually look at that book? So, there's a lot going on in that sales, and there's a lot of. That's where it gets competitive. The Oregon wine industry is very collaborative on the, making wine, growing grapes, and whatnot. There's a lot more, and there is there is some collaboration on the sales and marketing bit, but there also is a lot of. That's where the competition comes in.
Sure.
In terms of selling and marketing.
So you come back to the family in 1998, come back to family business, now a complete family business, no outside investors.
Right.
What's your role and what's the plan when you get hired here? Is there a long-term vision, or is it just, this is the next thing I'm doing?
So, no, there was not a long-term vision, but I think in my mind, when I decided to come back to the family business full-time in 1998, it was really this will probably be the last job I ever have. And if not, that could be pretty embarrassing. So the idea was, but the thing was, that was in my mind. My mom and dad still didn't talk about second generation running the business at that time. And really, it wasn't until the mid-90s that the winery even started making money. So, we were, good cash flow, but not profitable. So it wasn't until the mid-90s that we actually started becoming profitable, that we could actually make some investments and, think more than just hand to mouth. Because my parents didn't start with a lot of money. I mean, that started with family loans that we had to pay back. And, that was, and then pay back to the point where, oh shit, we got to cash out family members and bring in investors, and that's where the Durand and Highlands came in, because the family called the loans. So it's a lot of what you see now are very large companies coming into Oregon with and this is an easy investment to make, or people who instead of buying a yacht in their retirement, they buy a vineyard. Okay, but there still are some, people who are starry-eyed who have nothing and start from scratch. It seems to be fewer and farther between these days. But so it really wasn't until my sister came on in 2004, 2005, that I think my mom started seeing that this could be a second generation company. So.
And so what was your role when you got hired?
My role in '98 was I was a sales rep. So I basically went wherever my mom told me to go. So I traveled the country. So in '98, '99, really I was working myself up to general sales manager. Traveling a week a month until like 2010, really. For 12 years, just a road warrior. And then we developed a pretty robust export sales program, so I was traveling all over the world too, setting up sales and all over the place. So it was tough, with my boys, and it's tough traveling that much, as my sister's finding right now. It's tough. Because in 2010 is when I transitioned over to become 100% production. So really focusing on, becoming the new winemaker. When my stepdad Russ decided to retire in 2010, I said, hey, I'd love to become winemaker. And so that was a transition, and I took over as winemaker in 2012. So that was my first vintage as winemaker. So, but for the first 12 years, I was road warrior. So putting a lot of miles.
Tell me about the reaction to Oregon wine when you were out trying to sell it nationally, internationally in the late 90s, early 2000s.
So there was still a lot of what my parents dealt with in the 70s and 80s and early 90s, which was you gotta explain what Oregon is. You don't have to do that anymore. But I still had to say, let me tell you about Oregon. This is where Oregon is. North of California, south of Washington. And also Pinot Noir. Talk about Pinot Noir. Pinot Noir, is, lighter than Cab and Merlot. I mean, everything was in relation to what everyone knew, which was Cab Merlot. So really it was Oregon, and then it was Pinot Noir, and then it was Sokkelblasser. So Oregon, Pinot Noir, Sokkelblasser. So I couldn't really start talking about myself until I really felt that the people understood Oregon and then also understood Pinot Noir. These days, God, man, that hurdle is so low now. You don't have to jump that hurdle anymore. Which is great. It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
So as you were transitioning into production, tell us about the transitioning into the co-presidency with Allison. Tell us about the kind of transition as your mom was retiring and stepdad's retiring, and how that all worked.
It was really tough. There's that old adage that, generals don't die, they just slowly fade away. And that was definitely with my mom. Transitioning that transition was 2008 from my mom to my sister and I when we were co-presidents. My mom always loved to say when she retired that, hey, it's taken two people to replace just me. So my son and Alex and got Allison, co-presidents. But the transition with Russ, a transition with a winemaker, a winemaker, the job is to create, is a very generative position. It's artistic and it's scientific. And there's so many ways to make wine. So many ways. Every part of the process belongs to the winemaker. Every part. So when there's a transition, things are different. And I think, Russ got to see, Russ and I are very different people. So Russ, fortunately or unfortunately for him, got to see how detailed the changes would be because he didn't really leave. He was winemaker, and it wasn't like he just left and we never saw him again. No, he just stopped being winemaker, but he was still around. So he still saw what I was doing, and then the drama between Russ not liking what I was doing, and then he would tell my mom, and then my mom would tell me, and then it just awful triangle, and that was tough. So one of the beautiful things of a family business is there's inherent trust, but there's also, you can get into some weird family dynamics. There's a triangulation in terms of what is actually going on. So trying to work through that was really and if we didn't have our business coach, it probably wouldn't have been as successful as it was. And it's tough because you're dealing with, as a winemaker, you have a lot of ego. This is what you've created. This is what you've done. And what? Someone new's coming in, you're going to change everything? What? So if you're changing everything, that means you think what I did was crap?
Right.
What? So, there's no getting around that. And part of me wanting to become winemaker was because I've seen winemaker transitions before where the new winemaker comes in and they feel they have to change everything. Just because they have to make their mark.
Right.
I mean, doing to the extent of what Trump did to Obama. I don't care if it's a good idea or a bad idea, we're changing everything. Just because that's,
it has your name on it.
I gotta make my mark. I gotta pee on every bush. I gotta mark everything. And I didn't want that to happen. Because I didn't want our style to change that much. Because when Russ came in, 180 change from John Ha. When John Ha came in, there was a lot of changes from Bob McRitchie. So when I came in from Russ, I wanted to change some things, but I didn't want it to be like a flipping wholesale change day one. It was like I said, all right, there's some things I want to try that are different, but I'm not going to change the main thing, which is really similar pick dates, similar fermentation styles, and then might adjust. I'll cut some oak here, some
Sure.
So, and really it's been a 5-year change. So really leading style on a 5-year change. So I wasn't changing anything more than 10% a year. And that was important to me just because there's continuity in our brand. I didn't want a new winemaker coming in and just purely based on ego changing everything. And changing things based on no better, not in my mind, not for a really good reason. Because your ego is not, it's important, but it's not everything. So, yeah, that transition was tough.
How did you get through it?
Business coach. She'd call everyone on their shit, and that was good. Just an independent outsider who said, who said at times, you guys, you hired Alex to be a winemaker, just let him do his thing. Just let him do his thing. So, and that was, I needed that. So.
At what point, if that point has happened, did you feel that you were the winemaker? Like that your decisions were now unquestioned, or not unquestioned, but you know what I mean, unchallenged?
Yeah, I am my harshest critic. I still I think winemaking is one of those things where you will not reach the top of your game until probably your last harvest. Because don't forget, you only get one shot a year to make wine. That's it, one shot. And a good winemaker, he or she will have maybe 30 chances to make a great wine, to make their mark. If they're lucky, 30 chances. So that's why if you really want to make something, distill. Make beer. Wine, if you're lucky, you get 30. 30 years as a winemaker. A winemaker is a physical demanding job. So really at about 60, you're going to be like, oh man, I gotta walk up the stairs. Oh man, this is, my back is bad. So I am learning a lot. And the adage is true. You make wine in the vineyard. And the vineyards are changing a lot these days, just with global warming, climate change. Seeing things I've never seen before in my life. And it's just, keeping up with that. How do you make wine when you're seeing something that you have absolutely we do have control over it, but, there's only, there are things we can do, and there are things that we need the collective as a society to do. And that's, I think, the pinch point right now. So I know I'm the winemaker, the buck stops with me, and in my own mind, I'm still like, sometimes I feel like I'm barely hanging on because the variables change so much all the time. And just when you think that you've honed one thing, a variable changes. It's like, well, I don't know. So it's a lot like riding a surfboard. So, and one day I know. It's to me, winemaking is a lot like. I love baseball, so I played baseball in high school and college, and a lot of being a good winemaker is like being a good hitter, and you get better the more pitchers you see, and God is Mother Nature, that is the pitcher. So you're sometimes Mother Nature. My first harvest was 2012. Mother Nature threw a fastball right down the middle of the plate, and when you get that, you got to make her pay. So that was a great vintage, over the fence hit. But most years are really pitches that you have got to figure out a way to put the bat on the ball. And the more years you have on your plate, the better chances you have of getting really the meat of the bat on the ball and getting more than just on base. Maybe you can get an RBI. Maybe if you're lucky, you can get a home run. But those will come very rarely. Very rarely. So the years to go by, my hope is I was batting maybe 150 in 2012. Now I feel I'm batting 250.
Sure.
When I retire, I'm batting 300, maybe 350.
And 5 years.
Why
later,
not 400?
5 years later in the Hall of Fame.
So it's just it's you learn more tricks, you learn more things, but at the same time, God, this weather is crazy. So
you mentioned you kind of mentioned this a little bit, but your winemaking philosophy you mentioned starts in the vineyard. So what is your winemaking philosophy? How would you define you as a winemaker?
I think winemaking philosophy, you start with what you love. I love any Chablis from Le Clos. Anything, because what I get from that is just purity of fruit. You just get this aspect of the terroir from this area in Chablis in France, and I love that. And so that's my favorite wine in the world. So what I try, what I love as a winemaker is I love purity of fruit. So I use oak. I've ratcheted back our new oak percentage from around 40 down to 20% new oak, because I want that purity of fruit that we get from our vineyard. These beautiful red fruits, red cherry, red raspberry, red plum, sometimes cranberry on those flavors are seeding, because that's more of a red flavor you get from a cooler vintage. And that fruit, with some of the weight that the vintage can bring you, so the tannins, and I want those tannins I want you to feel the weight without it drying out your tongue or making you go, wow, that's really sharp. I want those tannins to be on the smoother side, because that's what I like. I want to drink a glass of wine with the food, whatever I'm eating, and I want to have another glass. And a lot of that is the balance. But the main thing is I want this purity of fruit. I want you to know that this is not a completely cellar magic wine, where there is a lot of tricks you can do in the cellar to do certain things. And so that a lot of that comes from the vineyard. Also, acid's important to me too. I love acid. So that really drives, at the end of the day, that drives my picking decision in terms of when I pick. So I like to pick on the earlier side. I want a little bit more acidity. I don't want to get overripe flavors in the wine. I want that brightness and the freshness. And then potentially add weight by how we ferment, maybe add a little bit of weight with some new oak in the oak aging, 16 months. But I want to keep that purity of fruit. That's what's most important to me. So, and I want that also, I want that fruit to show decades down the road. So one thing I do, one of the changes I do for my stepdad is I filter all the wine. All the wine's filtered now. And I filter it. The reason I filter is to keep that purity of fruit there now and into the future. If you don't filter, you got wine spoilage bacteria, or what I would call the wine nasties, are in the wine, just waiting to eat up the SO2 and then take over the wine and turn it into something that you had not intended it to be. So I filter for longevity, and I filter for the style I want to showcase.
You guys are seen as one of the you're on the forefront of sustainability, live, Sam and Dave. Why was that kind of stuff important to the family, and why is it important to you as the winemaker?
Yeah. So, what I always find interesting about my parents is that, there's this image that they were hippies, My parents were not hippies. My parents were entrepreneurial. They were part of the Back to the Earth movement, but they weren't the pot smoking, Birkenstock wearing, wearing tie-dye stuff, in the 70s. That was not them. They were open to a lot of change, but they're also fairly entrepreneurial in terms of wanting to try something new and taking a lot of risk in this business. But they always felt that however they were running their business, they wanted to be as good to the earth as possible. And that meant something different over the years. So back in the 70s and 80s, it meant working with the local conservation district to pioneer cover crops in the vineyard. In the 90s, it meant helping start my mom helped start the third-party certification live. And then in the aughts, it became, organic became something that wasn't just part of, there used to be 50 different laws on organic farming in the United States. And then once the National Organic Program became a law in 2000, 2001, 2002, I forgot what it was, we decided to say, hey, now there's a national definition of what it is to be organic. It's not my state over your state. And there is more integrity to the program than ever before. So that's when we decided to become organic. And now, it's B Corp, sort of being B Corp certified. So it's not just farming organically or trying to reduce waste, it's trying to say, hey, from a whole system standpoint, how can we be better, more attuned to the decisions we make and the effect they have on people, planet, profit. So, because sometimes, we make decisions purely based on what's in front of us. And sometimes we're not even taking in consideration profit, which you think would be normal in a business. And then also consider, what does this effect be on the people? What will this effect be on the planet? So, sustainability is as much about making money as it is about saving the planet, as it is about being good partners with your team and the local community. So it's all three of those things. It's that it's hard to do. I don't even know how realistic it is to do all three really, really well. Because a lot of the things that are good for the planet cost us a lot more money. And so internally we've said, listen, if it's a 5% more, then we'll do it. If it's more than that, we got to really think and say, wow, this is really going to, it's going to be like this is better for the planet, but it's 20% more than the other product, other supply that we buy. How we think about these things, we weigh these things, and, again, we're not always making the decision that's best for the planet, but know that we're considering it, and there's a discussion behind it. And I think that's, at the end of the day, that's what sustainability is you're having a discussion, you're thinking. It's not black and white. There's a lot of gray out there. So, and the decisions you make have effects in all three realms. So that's sustainability is something that is as important now as ever before. To try to hold on to what we have in Oregon and keep it like this for the next generation.
Sure.
So
we talked earlier about your transition to winemaker. Let's talk about your transition into being a co-president and what that was like, and working side by side with your sister, and how that transition and the balance there has worked out.
Yeah. So that that was, looking back, my sister and I get along really well, and I think, but we're also very, very different. She sees black, I see white. So, which was different than me and my mom, because before my sister came on, it was my mom and I were kind of, running the show. So my mom and I, we probably didn't get along as well as my sister and I did, but we saw eye to eye in everything. So it's kind of like, from a business standpoint, yeah, mom and I were like really aligned. So now, Alice and I have a good relationship, but wow, we come at things very, very differently. So, which is better, which is easier? They're both. I don't know. Sometimes I wish we saw more eye to eye, and sometimes, sometimes not. But, so I think the idea to make us co-presidents was very, very fraught with peril, because most co-presidencies are crash and burn. They don't work. And actually, I had a good friend bet against us. And the whoever won had to buy the other one a box of Cuban cigars. So I smoked my last Cuban 2 years ago. So unfortunately for him, so he actually had to get me a box of cigars back when this is before Obama, opened up Cuba. I think the way, so my parents felt that, and the family felt that having co-presidencies, the dual accountability that you would have, not only would I have my sister's back, but I would hold her accountable to do what I know she needs to do, and vice versa. So there would be that person because on a day-to-day basis, Allison's the CEO, so Allison runs the show. So Allison, she has the final word on everything. But the co-presidency comes in because we both have the equal, power when we report up to the board. So, or when we're at the board setting strategy and whatnot. So that's where we actually have, that's where the co-presidency really comes into play. Less so on a day-to-day basis, because Allison, she, again, when you run sales and marketing, you need to have control over what's going on, because that's the hardest thing to do. It's not the winemaker. I know winemakers will tell you, but having done sales and marketing, making wine is fun. You got to worry about everything that happens in the marketplace. It's insane. So that's why, she is CEO and I'm just a winemaker. But the co-presidency, I think, is the family set it up, and I still see the value in it today. Is that we hold each other accountable, and we're both supportive of each other when we have the biggest discussions we have on the year, which is at the board level, talking about the budget, talking about 3 to 5 year plans, and things that really dictate our future. So.
Do you remember the first major decision you made as co-presidents? Or first major disagreement you had?
My mom handed over the baton to Allison and I on January 2nd, 2008. That was an extremely tumultuous year for me. Got divorced that year. I became co-president. The economy took a massive shit. And Allison was gone for half the year because she just gave birth to her first kid. So I had a pretty full plate that year. And I think the first decision, the major decision we made, because of the economy, is we said we're not going to fire anyone. We're not laying anyone off. We're going to figure this out. So we took in everything. We brought payroll in-house. We did our own cleaning. Everything we brought in-house. Everything. And we didn't lay anyone off. So that was probably that first, it was probably the first big thing we decided to do. Major disagreements? I think, it has been about I think the last big disagreement was, a lot of it has to do with sustainability. Because there are, the last big disagreement we had, I think, was about to go for, when we were building this building. to go for what's called the Living Building Challenge. The Living Building Challenge, which was basically, because I was overseeing the project, and it was basically, it's a wonderful third-party certification that if you can get it, you're God. I mean, it's very difficult to get. It's like LEED Platinum times 2.
Wow.
It's insane. So when my sister and I was like, this is stupid. Allison, this is like, you were just taking $30,000 and we're just gonna set it on fire. For $30,000, let me expand the solar panels. She's like, no, we're gonna go for this. We're doing Living Building Challenge. This is the cutting edge. This is cutting edge of sustainability. I said, well, we're gonna get cut by it because we can't do this. This is impossible. And I really felt that way. And then, but the rest of the family agreed with Allison, which was totally cool. But it really was impossible, you know. And we didn't hit it. And who's to say it wasn't worth going for? I mean, I shot the moon. I applied to a bunch of colleges I never got into. You know, what was I thinking? That wasn't pragmatic. So, you know, my family still is entrepreneurial, and we went for something that I don't think I take that back that we just set fire to $30,000 because we did learn a lot by it. You know, we didn't achieve it. But we learned a lot from that experience. But I think that was the last big thing that, you know, we went to loggerheads about. So, yeah.
You mentioned your first decision coming in as the economy is tanking, and your first decision is not to lay people off. So tell me why that was your first reaction to the crisis was we're not going to lay people off.
Just because, you know, everyone's hair was on fire. You know, and to settle the ship and saying, hey, you know what? I know your hair's on fire. Yeah, no one's getting raises this year, but guess what? We're not firing anyone. We're not laying anyone off. Your job is safe. Okay, sure. Thanks. Totally settled the ship. If our whole staff said, we can have layoffs, and if we said we don't know, what?
Yeah.
The hair's on fire. Hair's on fire. And they're running around with hair on fire. No. So I think just settling everyone's nerves and just letting everyone know that don't worry, we're gonna figure this out one way or another. But no, we're not laying anyone off. There's gonna be no job force reductions. You know, that's not gonna be us. And I think that was really, you know, that's one thing that I learned a lot about during the Great Recession was sometimes you just, you know, need to do some old-fashioned leadership. You need to put a flag in the ground, and whether it's wrong or right, you got to put a flag in the ground somewhere because people need answers. Your team needs some answers. That's what we felt strongly about, and then Allison went on leave. She's like, good luck. I'm like, don't worry, got it. It's all right. The sky's falling, but I got this.
That's right.
So,
you talked earlier about some of the growing up with some of the second generation kids, the Ponzi kids, Jason Lett, Adam Campbell. I'm curious, as you now have all grown into the family business and are in leadership roles, if there's an added pressure that you feel being second generation, having your family name or your family still around, part of the business, that you look at your wine or business differently than other folks who may be the same age in Oregon wine.
Well, yes and no. I think we have put an added pressure onto Allison and I because we've been very vocal in saying that, you know, Sokol Blosser is here to be a third, fourth, and fifth generation business. So that's a lot of pressure. So basically, we're telling all these mergers and acquisition artists that we're in it to win it, we're not in it to spin it. So everyone's for sale these days, and the M&A people are opening up offices all over the freaking place. But we tell them, you know what, for better or for worse, and it could be for worse, we're going to remain family owned and operated. That could be to our demise, but we're going to do our damnedest to figure that out. So it would be a little bit less pressure to say, you know what, we're open to spinning it, we're open to investors, and we could probably get those tomorrow.
Yeah.
And you could have, a way out. But at this point, our way out is ensuring that we have a third generation who has passion and competence to take a role in the business, and if they don't, to hire a really good caretaker who can run the show until the fourth generation is ready. So,
do you feel like you're sort of like the guardians of like the Oregon ethos, like the what you talk about, the back to the land in the 60s and 70s, and kind of the spirit that founded the local industry? Do you feel like that's part of your responsibility now?
Not really. I've never really thought about that.
I hope I didn't just add something to your plate. I didn't mean to.
Yeah, thanks, man. No, I mean, the thing that I feel very confident about the future of the Oregon wine industry is that it's not going to change that much. It's going to change, but it's not going to change that much. I mean, Oregon will change you. You move here, you see how we roll, you'll fall in line. And that's the DNA of what it is to be an Oregonian. You are here because you want to have a good lifestyle. You are not here to make a shitload of money. If you want to make a ton of money, you're not going to live here. You will move to Washington, or you will move to California, or another state where people shoot the moon all the flipping time. There's only one Fortune 500 company in Oregon, that's Nike. That's it. We're an ag state. We're a lifestyle state. That's who we are. So, it is, and that's the way Oregon's always been. And I don't see that changing. So when I see big conglomerates move here, they fall in line. And I think Oregon has a way of I wouldn't say humbling you, but I think it has a way of making you realize that there are wonderful other places that you can go and shoot the moon. But Oregon may not be that place. Oregon's that place to, follow your passion, but it's also a place that it's just beautiful to be. It's beautiful to be in Oregon. It's reflective of everything we do, from the land use laws to, making the beach public to bottle build. I mean, there's so many things that reflect that and how we roll. And same with the Oregon wine industry. I think it's very difficult to make a lot of really good Pinot Noir. So you can't make 10,000 cases of a super Zorch Pinot Noir. Maybe 500 cases, maybe 1,000 if you're lucky, but it's just small amounts of like super high-end Pinot Noir. So you're not going to make a lot of money on that, unless you come into Oregon with a lot of money to start with.
So what do you see? You don't see it changing a whole lot. What do you see in the future for Oregon wine in the next 10, 15 years?
Well, we got to get rid of all the marijuana. That's having an effect. That's weird. I didn't see how weird it's going to be.
Yeah.
You got soccer moms on the sidelines eating edibles. I mean, what the hell? It's not. You see on the sidelines drinking a little bit of, a wine spritzer. No. You got edibles pop left and right. I'm like, what? Seriously? This is what's happening? So, That's going to be interesting. I don't know where that's going to go. Like with anything, I think there's always going to be room in the marketplace for a great product. Could be a wine, could be a restaurant. There's always room for another great restaurant. There's not room for another wine that's just ho-hum. So I think it's going to continue to get very competitive in the Oregon wine industry. And I think if you're going to get into it, you got to know what you're getting into. And that's why I think a lot of wineries in Oregon are for sale these days, just because people realize, man, this is a tough business.
Yeah.
This is tough. This ain't easy. You got distributors consolidating, so my access to national distribution is tough. Direct to consumer, everyone, only so many people can be in so many wine clubs. So yeah, it's tough. But that being said, Oregon is one of the bright spots in the wine industry. I mean, the overall wine market's only up 1% to 2% this last year, and in previous years it was up 5 to 10%. So it's slowing down a little bit. That's why I think I'll hang that on marijuana. I'll blame marijuana for that.
That's right. Got
to blame somebody. Can't be me. But in terms of Oregon, I think Oregon is up like double digits still nationally. So Oregon still has some growth. But I do think it is the hurdle to make wine in Oregon is very low now, and the hurdle for people to accept your wine is low. What's high is making money in it and doing it well year in, year out, because that's where I think it's going to be challenging, because it's so competitive.
What is it about Oregon wine that makes it so desirable nationally? Why is it still growing?
Because I do think the people that we are attracting and the people who set up shop here are mostly real. They're real people with real passion and real stories. This is not a giant brand just flipping, let's try this brand. Let's try, Naughty Light Bulb Chardonnay, Naughty Light Bulb Merlot. Let's see if that works. It might work. Someone likes light bulbs. People like being naughty. Boom. There's a little bit more realness, and I think that'll always resonate. I mean, people say authenticity is big these days. I don't think it's more or less than it's ever been. Coke is still popular. Everyone drinks Coke. How authentic is that? But millennials still, they love Coke. Okay, that's fine. But I still think, there's always going to be room for that authentic story and people who say, hey, yeah, I made this. This is me. Here's my story. And I think Oregon's full of people like that. And I think as long as we can keep getting those messages out, I think there will continue to be good growth. And that's why I think, there's some big brands that are wondering how they fit into that. How would a Constellation fit into Oregon? How would Gallo fit into Oregon? What does that look like? How can we still be Oregon and have Naughty Light Bulb Pinot Noir from Willamette Valley? What is that? Can we do that? So
does it feel like that's going to change? It seems like a lot of people who are keeping Oregon that authentic, real, are sort of the first generation of the pioneers of the wine, of the industry. Will that change as they are out of the picture?
I don't think so. I mean, I think there's a number of new wineries that I feel there's a lot of passion and authenticity to, and like right down the street, Day Wine Company, Breon Day's got a lot of, incubator through a lot of brands there where, there's a lot of passion, not a lot of money, but a lot of passion to make great wine. I think of Walter Scott. You know, there's to me, there's the engine that drives Oregon is still the small upstart. And yes, I know that, you know, KJ gets a lot of play by the investments they've made and the brands that they've acquired. But still, you know, we're still very, very far away from becoming like Washington, where one winery is 60% of the wine industry, like Ste. Michelle. But look at Ste. Michelle in Oregon. They're not 60% here, and they own Erath. So
interesting. What about the future for you and for Sokol Blosser? What do you see happening here in the next 5, 10, 15 years, and for you personally and for the business?
You know, my passion, my focus is making compelling wines coming out of our vineyard site. I mean, our estate here in the Dundee Hills. My best vintages are still in front of me, you know, in terms of coming up with something that it's not just good, it's not just great, it's got to be compelling. It's got to be something that is just, you know, like in the movie This Is Spinal Tap, it's got to go to 11. You know, what does that look like? It's hard to put a descriptor to it. So to try to and make that, while at the same time, you know, the biggest concern I have right now is just trying to figure out, you know, what climate change, how it's going to affect us. You know, and every day that goes by, I'm like, you know, saw a lizard in the vineyard the other day, and I'm like, I've never seen a lizard in the vineyard. I see these in Southern California.
Right.
What the hell? You know? So, you know, just things like that just really make my hair on my back go up. It's like, oh, my God. What am I dealing with now? Are the locusts going to start descending? But the future for Sokol Blosser is going to be, you know, based on quality and based on, you know, staying and becoming even more relevant in the marketplace. I mean, that is always going to be our challenge. Is you're only as good as your last vintage, and you're only as good as how relevant you are in the marketplace. So Sokol Blosser folds tomorrow, all that market space will get taken in a second. In a second. So it is convincing everyone that they need Sokol Blosser wines. And I'm more than happy to make those wines, and I know my sister is more than happy to make that pitch. And that's how we're going to get to the third generation.
Sure.
And be the stewards that we know we need to be to the business. So
now that you have gone through these transitions in the second generation, and you're looking ahead to the third generation, what are the kind of pitfalls you're looking to avoid? What are the mistakes you made, or the obstacles that came up with that transition that you're hoping will go more smoothly when it's time to hand it on to the next generation?
I think to be intentional about everything, about the transition. And that starts, we've already started doing that with all the third generation by telling them that we want this to be a third generation business. That being said, there's no expectation that you need to be in the business. And to be intentional about exposing the third generation to all aspects of the business. So they see that, you know, we do everything in the business. We're farmers, we grow it. We're manufacturers, we make it into wine. And then there's sales and marketing. But there are other roles. We've got a warehouse. We have lawyers. We have bookkeepers, accountants. We have lab technicians. We've got landscapers. I mean, there are so many things. The only thing we don't have a philosopher on staff. So if you become a philosopher, probably won't be able to hire you. So there are, there are many aspects, many roles that need to be played here to make this business, to make great wine and sell it. So, so the hope, so there is a lot of intentionality to it, but there also is a lot of just sometimes you got to back off and let things happen. You can have the best intentions, and then it doesn't resonate with the third generation, and then we just have to go to the next step.
Sure.
So.
You talked about climate change and seeing a lizard in your vineyard, that's very strange. What are your concerns for the environment as you're going to be the winemaker for the foreseeable future here?
Yeah.
What is it you're worried about? Do you foresee being unable to grow Pinot Noir here in the future? Something that drastic?
I used to think that was probably pretty drastic, and that probably, that's horseshit. But now I'm starting to think that, I was just in California last week, and they are dealing with a massive catastrophe, basically because based on 2 years ago they had that drought. So I visited a vineyard that we work with down there to make a negociant wine called Evolution Red, and all around this vineyard in the hills, like 30% of the trees were dead. Dead. And the grower's like, yeah, it's because of the drought 2 years ago. So there's so much fuel around this vineyard that can just catch on fire. We don't have that in Oregon yet. We haven't had a drought like that. But hell, if we do, so the concern is not just in growing Pinot Noir, it's just that, what does it look like if, we already do have very dry summers. What does it look like if we do have more serious droughts and we don't get the water we usually take for granted in the wintertime? How different, it's probably, climate change is the big thing. How much is it going to change? My favorite restaurant on the coast, they had to raise it 9 inches because now when they have storms, the storms come in that much more. Because of sea level rise and because of the past crazy storms have, eaten away a lot of the beach, a lot of the dunes. So it's like, wow, that's scary. And the glaciers are I backpacked around Mount Hood 2 weeks ago, and it's like, wow, there's, the glaciers are receding quite a bit. It's all happening, and I don't, I used to think that, we'll still be able to grow Pinot Noir, but 20, 30 years from now, I don't, it may be that much warmer here that we won't be able to grow Pinot Noir like we used to. We can still grow it, it'll just be more California style. You won't have that acidity. You won't have that brightness. I don't know. It's the current president can say whatever they want, but it's looking at the things that he's trying to change, and we just need to raise complete holy hell about moving back the fuel standards for cars. That, he can pull out of the Paris Agreement, that, whatever. But if you pull back that the auto industry, instead of going for an average of 55 miles a gallon down to 30, that's real. That's a real thing. That is going to hit the climate hard. That's something that, I know that the activist in me is like, okay, that's where the rubber's going to hit the road if that thing actually goes through. Pulling out of Paris, fine, whatever. We knew you were going to do it. But it's the policies that are going to really hurt. That policy hurt.
Sure.
That's a setback. for all of us.
Yeah.
But, we march to a different drummer in Oregon. So hopefully, but part of that bill is that they're going to say states can't set their own standard.
Yeah.
So, but,
So what power does the Oregon wine industry have? Does it have any power to...
So the power that we have is, we are farmers, and climate change hits us incredibly hard. And it's about just telling our story and ensuring that that message doesn't get lost. And unfortunately, there's not many people in Oregon that aren't aligned with that story politically. Even my Republican friends, they're in. They know it's cool. That climate change is real, and we need to make some hard choices. Like, we need to make those like 20 years ago.
Yeah.
But now let's make them. We need to make them now. We'll make them. So, so it's not talking to ourselves in an echo chamber. I don't know. There's I'm not quite sure what we can do from a national standpoint, and that's kind of where the battle needs to play out. But on the Oregon, Washington, California, I mean, there's a lot of alignment on this. So
last question for you.
Yeah.
You obviously took a very interesting route to get into the industry. What advice would you give to someone who was looking to join the Oregon wine industry today?
Yeah. It's a great industry. I mean, there's so many facets to it. There are so many facets to it. And I think the best thing to do is keep drinking wine. Because through the wine, you're going to find out where your passion actually lies. Is it on the wine side? Is it on the sales and marketing side? Is it on a potential supplier side? Is it on doing something that is abreast to the industry but not in the industry, like being a lawyer or being a lawyer that focuses on wine, or but it all comes through drinking the wine, because that's where it all starts. You got to have that passion. You got to have that interest, because wine is a beautiful thing. I mean, it really is, something that is, it is a snapshot on the year, and everything you need to make wine is right there. The cluster of grapes, you got the yeast, you got the water, you got the flavors. You're not adding anything. It's just that's a beautiful thing right there. So, but just keep drinking, keep tasting, keep. Because if you're not interested in wine, then it's not your industry. So
that's all the questions I have. Anything else I should have asked you? Anything else you'd like to mention here at the end?
No, I think it's all good. I mean, those are all good questions. Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time and for your answers.
You're welcome.
Go ahead.
Thank you.
There.
So.